Organic, true urban breakbeat culture.
This is dbridge representing Exit Records, here to talk about Mosaic and other things. I think, within drum and bass there's two sort of definite sides in some sense, where there's the dance floor and what caters for that, and for me I like that side of it, but what I always liked about drum and bass was the other side. I missed albums like Matrix, Sleepwalker, or so the Photech albums that you can put on and listen, and they worked equally as well in the club as well as at home. So I was getting sent all this music from all these different artists, and it was like it needed to be put together in some ways, which is why we started the whole Autonomic podcast in the first place as well. Just that need to kind of get all this music that was out there, sort of that people were doing separately, to try and bring it together and give it some kind of context for people to kind of get it, so to speak. So this, in some ways, this album is a continuation of the idea behind the podcast. We kind of did it first with the Fabric Live CD, that compilation, but that was mixed. But I wanted to do something where everyone else can have the records to do what they want with us, as they see fit, kind of thing. So I was getting sent all these tunes from everyone, and they were originally earmarked as 12 inches, but I was just waiting for B-sides, and some of them were coming, some of them weren't, and it was kind of like, well, I'd kind of put them all together, and I was listening to them, and it just seemed to me they kind of worked as a whole thing, as a compilation. So I thought, well, why not? So yeah, it was just kind of, it all came together quite naturally, really. It was all these, I had all these tracks, and it seemed to work. So it's kind of like, okay, what's the best way of doing this? What's the best way of putting these tracks together? And we'd had the experience of kind of, with the podcast, of, piecing music together. So it kind of, that's why it kind of felt like there was these two CDs that needed to happen, which would kind of cater for the two different sides within what we're doing, So the first one being probably a lot more laid back, but still just showcasing what it is that I like personally about drum and bass, that it has that kind of, can go in so many different directions, and it doesn't have to just cater just for the dance floor. And then with the CD, the second CD, the other side, probably a bit more upbeat, still that kind of stuff that I like and love, some of the rollers, and just interesting, but not as paint by numbers as a lot of other stuff out there. So yeah, it did, like I said, it felt natural. It felt like it's something as a label I wanted to do, and it feels like something that I want to continue to do as well. So I'm really pleased with the way it's come out. This is kind of like the next step, naturally, right, we now need to get this music out to people for them to be able to have it themselves. It's all well and good us hoarding all these great tunes, but we need to kind of get other people involved and be a part of it. I've always been amazed at how, as a genre, we were able to kind of get all these, bring all these influences in and make something new out of it. And that's what I always loved about it, say the heyday, or I suppose my heyday of drum and bass, sort of the Blue Note era, and kind of, what people were doing then, and there was all these different, you see all these different influences, and it's just nice to kind of like, with the artists that I got in there, that, there is almost, I suppose it sounds conceited in some ways, but kind of just an adult approach to making music, and you can hear that, and also just this kind of sense of sort of a personal, you can hear them as the artists within what they're doing, which is what kind of draws me to music and to the tracks on this album. That I can, hear that sense of honesty in what they're doing, rather than this kind of like, okay, what can I do to make everyone go, it's like, I don't really give a shit about that. So, that's why I say tracks like Stray's track, for me, it was just, it kind of appealed to me in a sense of, I'm a big lover of the Warp record label, and, I'm just quite a new convert to some of that stuff on there, like Boards of Canada and Auteca and things like that. But you can hear that those kind of influences are in there, and how they come across. So it's just nice to be able to kind of have a collection of music that's not, just not following what everyone else is doing, so to speak. So it's just kind of people making the music that they want to make for the love of it, which is what I think was missing in drum and bass for a long time. Coming from my point of view, where I was part of Bad Company, I kind of, we literally took it to the sort of pinnacle of kind of music for the masses, so to speak, to the point where the masses decided what's going on and what's happening. So it was like nice to have that. I don't really give a fuck about what anyone else thinks. I want to make music for me, which is what, in some ways, I think dubstep did and gave our scene the kick up the arse it needed, in the sense of like, you could hear that these producers were coming along making music for the love of it, rather than what they thought everyone else wanted to hear. So there's that element in a lot of the tracks in there, and it's just like with tracks like instrumentals, Scene Free, Invisible Cities, Chroms, it's just this. It just kind of showcases for me what it is that can still be done within D&B. When we started the whole Autonomic thing, everyone was like, it's nothing new, and we never professed for it to be anything new, so to speak. It was just kind of us sort of rewinding a bit, and then rather going down this path, we thought, okay, we'll go that way instead and see where it takes us. So we're still a lot of the artists are still doing that, going down that path, seeing where it takes them, and not being sort of constrained by what they think people want to hear. So we slowed the tempo down, definitely. We kind of, as we said, 170 BPM seems to be the norm at the moment. So within that as well, you've got the half tempo, which is the 85 BPM. So in some ways, it kind of brought us closer to the dubstep scene, in the sense of, those guys were doing things at half tempo. So 70 BPM, 15 BPM, it's not that big a difference really. So it's like that's why I kind of, it seems to me that's why a lot of people within that scene kind of get what it is that we're doing, or deal with the people within like instrumental and so on are trying to do. So I just personally think there's just so much scope to do stuff really within those like our tempo range. There's a lot that just by slowing it down a little bit, just kind of opened it up a lot more to rhythms and melodies and key changes and song structures that weren't really being explored. Well, I suppose in some ways they are with the more mainstream drum and bass, but just in terms of what we're doing, I think is there's that space again to try things out. I think we've just if anything, we've just kind of said to people and said to these artists, like, look, there's so much that can still be done. What can you do? Let's hear it. Let's see it. So I'm just getting some really good stuff at the moment. I said, like, Scuba's doing some awesome stuff and putting it out on his label as well, which is good. You got Ramadan's done under the Pearson sound. And I'm just, I don't know, there's a lot of new artists coming through, and I think it's like, there was always a kind of snobbery in some ways in drum and bass, where if you hadn't done your apprenticeship, so to speak, then you can't really come in, and it's all that, that's kind of, I admit I had that kind of sentiment as well. It's like, well, you need to have been suffering for 8 years before you can get anywhere in this scene. But good music is good music, and so someone like Mode and Stray, who people haven't really heard of, it's like I can't deny that these tune tracks are good, so I'm going to put them out. So it's just good to hear these kind of kids, I'm not going to say kids, that's condescending, but yeah, you know, these new producers coming through and just giving me a kick up the arse and giving me that inspiration to kind of try things out as well. So that's why I'm at the moment as well, just trying to sign albums from a lot of these people, because I'm interested to see where they go, given where they'll go within the, okay, you've got 72 minutes you can get on a CD, what can you put on there? So Dan Harbour, he's just done an album for me. Got Loxy and Resound have just done an album for me, so it's from my point of view, things are good, and it's a really interesting time. It's just in terms of where people want to go. True urban breakbeat culture, organic.
Organic. True urban breakbeat culture. Organic. True urban breakbeat culture.
This is dbridge representing Exit Records, here to talk about Mosaic and other things. As much as the DJ, I've got these many sides to what it is that I do: label manager, producer, DJ, whatever. And it's like I have had to adapt in some senses where going out there and lugging records about doesn't make sense anymore, sort of thing. It's, the whole advent of the CD and Serato. I've taken them on. And I used them to my advantage. I think it was like, I quite was interested. I think it was Ronnie actually said it. I play music, not a medium, which is, I thought that's a fair comment. But at the same time, the flip side is I'm also a record collector myself. I love that, picking up a record, looking at it, the whole process of putting it on the player. This whole thing, I think, let's say early, it was been around 2002-3, where people were starting to see the decline of sales, and it was like, shit, what are we going to do? How can we make money? Okay, well, let's start. We can do this, keep things cheap, put it in a night, put it in a cheap, just put it in a disco bag and fling it out there. No real artwork, and it was kind of like, well, it kind of felt to me like, well, hold on a minute, if anything, now's the time to actually probably spending a bit more money on that and put out a good-looking product that people want to keep. Because I kind of base the way I release records in the same way I consume them myself. So when I go record shopping, the things that draw it to me, I'm a sucker for limited editions and all that kind of stuff. So I was always, that was something I always wanted to do, which is why I did the whole Aptitude series. But another thing that bugged me as well was when I went to Japan, and those people out there, they know how to catalogue music, and I go out there and I go record shopping and I'm just like, where's drum and bass? It's like, there's no drum and bass, and it was kind of like, suddenly it was almost deemed uncool, and it was like, hold on a minute, when did that happen? And it probably really freaked me out. So I had this kind of, it was like a personal challenge, or a personal goal for me. It was like, I want to get my records, back in those kind of stores again, and even, like I said, the style stores, all those kind of things. Shops like Rough Trade weren't stocking it, all the stores that used to stock it weren't really interested in what the record drum and bass anymore, and it was like, well, what is that? And I think one side of that just is the presentation of it, obviously the content on there as well. So I've just, alongside an instrumental, with their label, we just kind of like, we actually have personal battles between us, like who can come up with the maddest concept, and I think they're winning at the moment with their sleeve. But I think it's important to put together a good product. It's music records nowadays aren't. We haven't got the sales that we used to have, which is clear. So you have to cater for the MP3 market. I think the average person out there hasn't got access to a record deck, so vinyl is a kind of new format to them. But it's there's those out there who do love that, and I'm one of them. And I think in terms of my sales as a label, they still account for quite a bit of it. MP3s, they do alright, but I kind of almost sell them because I have to rather than I want to. I don't like the format. For me it feels like, in 10 years time, an MP3 that you bought, one, you can even remember it. Two, it's going to be on some redundant hard drive that you can't remember, that's probably crashed and corrupted and you haven't backed up. So there's no kind of, it's got this real disposable nature about it, which I don't like, which is why I find I'm still drawn to vinyl, just for those reasons alone. And I like the idea of, in years to come, going through a record shop, flicking through, I'm still in there. It's an important format that, regardless of what happens to technology, shouldn't be forgotten. When I first started Exit, it was very personal, kind of like it was just for me and that was it. But nowadays, because I'm putting out other people's records, I now realise that I have to try and sell as many copies of someone's tunes as I can to kind of, to at the end of every 6 months be able to give them some money. So that's why I'm kind of had to sort of succumb to the MP3 market. But it's there's some things I'd like to change with it if possible. I don't like with iTunes the kind of pick and choose mentality that you can have with it. So it kind of takes away the concept of putting on a CD or putting off a vinyl and listening to an album through in its entirety as the artist intended. I don't like the idea of just shuffle, all that kind of. Obviously you can have your favourite tracks and such, but just to be able to kind of like, okay, here's that person's album, well, I only really want that track. So you kind of have to, in some ways, you kind of have to make buying the whole thing a desirable option as well. And also the changing nature of the market, which is now with the album. If you buy the vinyl, there was always that sense that people who buy vinyl kind of lose out because you can't physically put everything on there sometimes, or we've got like 21 tracks on this Mosaic CD. It's like, well, being able to put that onto, that's going to be like a 10-piece vinyl, which is, in terms of cost, is ridiculous. So it's like, well, now what we're doing, Break's recently done it with his, I know Caliber's doing it, is give the CD with the vinyl, give the CD free with the vinyl. So it's kind of like enticing people to buy that format, and not as a vinyl punter, them not losing out and such. I'm always looking for new things with the label. I love putting out records. I love putting the artwork together. For me personally, it's like another canvas in terms of you've got two sides of records and then you've got the artwork as well. It's this whole. It's all of it's just as important as the music. True urban breakbeat culture, organic.
Organic. True urban breakbeat culture. Organic. True urban breakbeat culture.
This is dbridge representing Exit Records, here to talk about Mosaic and other things. I'm just at that stage where it's like, I'm quite lucky to sort of still be here in some senses. Drum and bass has been really good to me. I could say that this is my sort of third incarnation in some ways. I've had, you know, Future Forces, Bad Company, and it's now me doing what I'm doing on my own. So it's like I just need to keep pushing myself, and you know, drum and bass is sometimes it boils my piss. Do you know what I mean? As a genre and as a scene, and traditionally what I've done when it has done that is buggered off and gone to make music with my brother. But he's living in Australia now, so I haven't got that. So what I did was I started working with instrumental instead. And it was good because, you know, those guys, they've just been out of the scene they were out of the scene for so long, and literally just decided, you know, we're going to come back and make some music, and sort of step back in as if they'd never left. So it was like, you know, I got caught up in the whole software all in the box and the convenience of it, and it is, you know, it's great, it's good, but there was, you know, listening to them and listening to, you know, there was something missing for me, and it was that sort of time-consuming kind of, you know, trying to get a bloody decent sound out of something that they just was just effortless for them, and they just gave me this sort of rekindled my love of the equipment that I had, and this sort of realisation that it suddenly, you know, it sort of dawned on me. It's like, oh, I've got all this stuff, and they'd be talking about this equipment, and I was like, yeah, I've got one of those. And they're like, what? And, you know, yeah, I've got one of those. Yeah, I've got one of those. It's like, it amazed them that I wasn't using it, and it kind of amazed me, thinking now I look back at it. So, you know, we'd be there working in the studio, and it was just, you know, they'd have this synth there, that synth there, and another one on the other side, and I missed that kind of interaction of people making music, you know, and it'd be a cacophony of absolute nonsense coming out of the keyboards, but eventually there'd be this kind of moment where actually that sounds all right, you know, yeah, right, okay, put that down, and we used to call it the Phineas Fogg, the frequency log. It was just like some of the, you know, things coming out. I was like, geez, come on, hold it down. But it was just that every now and then there'd be this, you know, because we're not accomplished musicians as such, so there'd be this moment of like this sort of 16 bars where we were actually really tight together, you know, as a band, like jamming. And I don't know, I just really liked that, and it just kind of reminded me of, like, you know, when I was working with Future Forces with Maldini, and the things that we used to do, just kind of the keyboards, he'd be on the desk, live EQ sweeps, reverb splashes, and the same working with Nico. That was a kind of real pivotal moment in my career as well, when we did tracks together and he could come in and engineer for us, and it was just kind of like, wow, okay, just being able to transform one sound into so many different things. And it's that kind of tactile, hands-on nature that you don't get with soft synths. You can't really, you know, that doesn't really do it for me anymore. I didn't have that many synths. I had quite a bit of outboard sort of effects and stuff like that, and then I've just sort of acquired synths in the last sort of 2-3 years. I bought that JX8P, Roland JX8P off mine, which he now regrets selling to me. But yeah, I got that. And then it was like, okay, I just suddenly got the bug, so I've just been sort of buying sort of synths ever since, and just, you know, it gives you that, especially with the old stuff, it's just, each one have got their own personalities in some ways. It's like, I know I made a sound on there yesterday, I know if I play it now it won't sound anything like how it did yesterday, and it's just that temperamental nature of them that I like, and it's kind of like that one moment, that, you know, that instant of, okay, that, you know, and now go into the track, and then, but with the soft synth, you know, you're going to turn it on, get the preset up, and it's just always going to sound the same. And for me as well, there was that thing of like knowing that everyone else would have access to the same bank of sounds that I didn't like. So especially nowadays with the, you know, things like, it's quite easy to reverse engineer other people's music. Oh, they did that with that, they did that with that. So yeah, for me, this kind of, it seems like it's going back, yeah, that thing of going back to go forward, really, just kind of going back to this old equipment, and just how I used to look at music. Yeah, so the second album, I've started it and finished it numerous times, and it's only till now because I've recently just moved into this space, and a lot of the stuff has been here, there, and everywhere. A lot of the equipment has been, lent to people. Or it's never been in all in one space, or I've had a set up in my front room, and it's kind of like, well, if I want to invite people down, it didn't really feel right to kind of like invite singers down to come and sit in my front room and sing on an album. So it was like, I've been waiting for a space like this, and this has sort of finally come along. And it just feels right now, because like I said, I felt like I was selling myself short with what I was doing before. I was making tracks which I liked, but they weren't what I ultimately wanted them to be, because I didn't have everything around me. So now I'm gonna start again, and see what happens. I've kind of, there's this whole, because I've started singing now, which is a new thing for me. I've been doing it for a while, but it's a new thing for me to be quite open with it and risk putting it on a record. I think that's going to be something that I'm going to explore and want to explore. It's that thing of me pushing myself. So I mean, like I said, I've had the thing like with Inner Disbelief, Glimpse, the thing on Martin's album. Seems Like sort of co-wrote, and then I wrote the lyrics on Justified on Breakage's album. So I'm really getting into that kind of whole songwriting and enjoying that side of things, because it is adding another string to my bow. So I think this album is probably going to be a lot of me warbling and giving it a go, and we'll see what happens. I'm nervous as hell. Not sure how people are going to take it. Whether it's going to be, with a lot of drum and bass on there, I don't know. But I think, I've been doing this long enough to be able to do what the hell I want now. So we'll see what happens. But I think, this album's just, the Mosaic album's just come out. I've got these other albums coming out. So it kind of gives me time to sort of spend time and really concentrate on what I'm doing. So it takes the heat off me a little bit, because the label's still got content coming out. So I'm hoping by the end of the year, I'll have something to put out. We'll see. True urban breakbeat culture, organic.
Organic. True urban breakbeat culture.